I was sitting at the far end of that mahogany table, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The conference room smelled like old leather and expensive cologne, the kind of scent that reminded me why I never belonged in places like this. When the lawyer said his name, my father's name, my chest tightened. Not because of the money. It was never about the money. It was about the years I spent trying to be seen by him. To keep listening to this beautiful and special story, please leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from, so I can include a special greeting for you in a future story. You shouldn't even be here, my half-sister said with that dry smile of hers. And the others laughed. They laughed when I wiped away a tear. They didn't know that tear was for everything I'd been denied, not for what I expected to receive. My name is Elena Harper. I was the only one who didn't grow up under that roof. When my mother died, they sent me away like someone getting rid of old furniture. I went to live with an aunt in another city, and at 18, I enlisted. The base became my home, my breath. I didn't bring my uniform that day. It wasn't a ceremony day. For years I watched from afar what was happening. They erased my name from albums, parties, family portraits. When I came back, he was already dead. And still I went, because I still carried his name, even if they pretended I didn't. The reading hadn't even started properly, and I could already feel their eyes on me, judging, questioning why I was there. My half-sister Victoria sat across from me, her manicured nails tapping against her Hermes back. My stepmother Helen occupied the chair that should have been reserved for family. But then again, I'd learned long ago that family was a luxury I couldn't afford. Elena, Victoria said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm surprised you found time in your military schedule to be. The way she said military made it sound like a disease. I met her gaze and said nothing. That's what the army taught me. Sometimes silence cuts deeper than words. The lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, cleared his throat and began reading. Helen got the house in the Hamptons. Victoria got the jewelry collection and the art pieces. My half-brother Marcus got the cars and the yacht. One by one, they smiled and nodded as if they'd already known what was coming. This is exactly what Daddy would have wanted, Victoria whispered to Helen, loud enough for me to hear. He always said family comes first. Family. The word stung because I remembered when I thought I was part of it. I remembered being 7 years old, standing in that same house, watching my father teach Marcus how to tie a tie. I'd asked if he could teach me too, and he'd patted my head and said, "Girls don't need to know these things, sweetheart." But my mother had taught me. She taught me everything before the cancer took her away. And what about Elena? Helen asked the lawyer, her voice dripping with false concern. Surely Robert left something for his daughter. The pause before daughter was deliberate. It always was. Mr. Whitmore shuffled through his papers. Actually, yes. There is something specifically designated for Miss Harper. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. Really, what could it be? I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me hoped for something, anything that would prove I mattered to him. The other part of me knew better. A letter, Mr. Whitmore said simply, and a small box of personal items. The room erupted in barely contained laughter. Victoria didn't even try to hide her amusement. A letter, after all these years. That's it. It's more than she deserves, Marcus mumbled, but loud enough for everyone to hear. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. Where is it? Mr. Whitmore handed me a manila envelope and a small wooden box. The box was light, almost empty. I could feel their eyes on me as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my father's handwriting. Elena, you were always too much like your mother. I hope you find peace. That was it. 15 years of absence. And that was his goodbye. I walked out of that conference room feeling like I was underwater. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of me, marble floors reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. I found a bathroom and locked myself inside, finally allowing myself to breathe. The box contained 3 things: a photo of my mother, a dried flower from her funeral, and a business card for a law firm I'd never heard of. The flower crumbled when I touched it, turning to dust between my fingers. When I returned to the conference room, they were celebrating. Helen had ordered champagne, and Victoria was already making calls about selling some of the inherited pieces. They looked at me like I was a ghost haunting their celebration. Feel better? Victoria asked with mock concern. I know this must be difficult for you. It's just hard, I said quietly. Being in the same room where he used to tell me bedtime stories. The lie came easily. My father had never told me bedtime stories, but I wanted to see their faces when they realized I had memories of him that they couldn't erase. Helen's smile faltered. Bedtime stories? Before Mom died, he used to read to me every night. Another lie, but this one felt necessary. He always said I was his brave little soldier. It was my mother who called me that. But they didn't need to know. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I don't remember that. You wouldn't, I said simply. You were too young. The truth was, Marcus was only 2 years younger than me, but doubt is a powerful thing. I watched it creep into their expressions. The possibility that there were parts of my father they didn't know. Well, Helen said, clearing her throat, I suppose we should start making arrangements for the estate. What arrangements? I asked. Victoria laughed. For the sale of the house, obviously, the main house. Helen can't possibly maintain it alone. The house where I grew up. Where you lived for 7 years. Victoria corrected. Before you went to live with your aunt. Before I was sent away. The distinction mattered. They'd made it sound like a choice. But 7-year-olds don't choose to leave their fathers. I left the law office and drove to the old house. It looked exactly the same. White columns. Perfectly manicured lawn. The kind of place that appeared in magazines about successful families. I parked across the street. And just sat there, remembering. The last time I was in that house. I was 7. My mother had been dead for 3 months. And Helen had already moved in with her children. I remember standing in the doorway of what used to be my room. Watching Victoria arrange her dolls on my old shelves. This is my room now, she'd said without looking at me. Mommy, Helen says you're going to live somewhere else anyway. I'd run to my father's study, where he was signing papers with a woman I didn't recognize. Daddy, Victoria says I have to move. I don't want to move. He'd looked up at me with tired eyes. Alina, sweetheart, your Aunt Martha loves you very much. She has a nice house with a big yard. But I want to stay with you. You can't. This arrangement is better for everyone. That was the day I learned that love had conditions, and I apparently didn't meet them. Now, 28 years later, I was sitting in my car looking at the house that had never really been mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Hope you're not too disappointed about the will. Dad always said you were better suited for a simpler life. I turned off my phone and drove to the base. When I walked through those gates, I felt like I could breathe again. The guards nodded respectfully. Here, I was Staff Sergeant Harper. Here, I mattered. I spent the night in my quarters, staring at the business card from the box. The law firm was called Morrison and Associates. I'd never heard of them, but something about that card felt important. The next morning, I called. Morrison and Associates. How can I help you? I'm Alina Harper. I found your business card in my late father's belongings. Oh, Miss Harper, we've been expecting your call. Mr. Morrison would like to meet with you as soon as possible. Expecting my call? I'd never heard of Mr. Morrison. Can you tell me what this is about? I'm afraid Mr. Morrison will need to explain that in person. Are you available this afternoon? Morrison and Associates was nothing like the marble and mahogany office where my father's will had been. This was a small, cluttered space that smelled like coffee and old books. Mr. Morrison was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Miss Harper, thank you for coming. Please sit down. I sat in the worn leather chair across from his desk. I'm not sure why I'm here. Your father hired me 20 years ago, he said simply. He was very specific about when I should contact you. 20 years ago, I would have been 15, living with my aunt, trying to figure out why my father had given me away. He hired you to do what? Miss Morrison pulled out a thick file, to manage a trust fund, and to make sure you received these when the time was right. He handed me a stack of legal documents. The top page was a stock certificate, Harper Industries, my father's company. But this wasn't just any stock. These were shares worth. I had to read the number twice. $18 million. Mr. Morrison said quietly. Your father purchased these shares in your name when you were 15. He's been paying me to manage them ever since. I stared at the papers in my hands. I don't understand. Your father was a complicated man, Miss Harper. He made a lot of mistakes, but he never forgot about you. Then why didn't he keep you? Why did he send you away? Mr. Morrison leaned back in his chair. I asked him the same question many times over the years. He always said the same thing. Elena is too much like her mother. She deserves better than what I can give her. The words from his letter echoed in my mind. You were always too much like your mother. He loved your mother very much. Mr. Morrison continued. Her death destroyed him. And you? You looked just like her. You had her strength, her independence. He was afraid he'd break you the way he broke himself. I felt tears threatening, but I pushed them back. So he gave me away. He gave you a chance. He could have kept you in that house, let you watch him drink himself to death, let you see him marry Helen out of loneliness rather than love. Instead, he sent you to your aunt, a woman who loved you unconditionally, and he made sure you'd never need him, or anyone else. I left Morrison's office with a briefcase full of documents and a heart full of questions. $18 million. Not just money, power. Harper Industries was my father's company, but with these shares I owned 40% of it. Victoria, Marcus, and Helen had inherited the house, the cars, the jewelry, but I had inherited the business. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd laughed at my tears, pitied me for receiving just a letter and a box. They had no idea that the little box contained the key to everything they thought they deserved. I drove back to the house, their house now, and knocked on the door. Helen answered, still in her celebration dress from the day before. Elena, what a surprise. What brings you by? I wanted to talk to Victoria and Marcus. Are they here? Of course. Come in, come in. We're just going through some of Robert's business papers. Victoria thinks we should sell the company. She has a buyer already interested. I followed her into the living room where Victoria and Marcus were surrounded by file folders and financial statements. They looked up when I entered, Victoria's face immediately shifting to that fake sympathy she'd perfected. Elena, how are you feeling? Better, I hope. Much better, I said, sitting down across from them. I actually wanted to talk to you about the business. Marcus looked confused. What about it? Well, I understand you're planning to sell Harper Industries. Victoria nodded enthusiastically. Yes. The buyer is offering $40 million for the whole company. We'll split it 3 ways, of course. Since we're the inheritors. That's interesting, I said quietly, because I don't think you can sell it. What do you mean? Helen asked. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the stock certificates. I mean, I own 40% of Harper Industries. You can't sell a company I'm a partner in without my consent. The room went silent. Victoria reached for the papers, her face pale. That's impossible. Dad left you a letter and a box. The letter led me to a lawyer. The lawyer had these. I spread the certificates across the coffee table. $18 million worth of shares. Purchased 20 years ago. Marcus was reading over Victoria's shoulder, his face growing paler by the second. This can't be real. It's very real. And it means that any sale of Harper Industries requires my signature, which I'm not planning to give. Victoria stood up so quickly her chair fell over. You can't do this. This is our inheritance. No, I said calmly. The house is your inheritance. The cars are your inheritance. The jewelry is your inheritance. The business is mine. But we need the money from the sale. Helen protested. The house is expensive to maintain. The taxes alone are not my problem. I'd never spoken to them like that before. My entire life, I'd been the quiet one, the one who accepted whatever they decided to give me. But 20 years in the military had taught me that respect is earned, not given. For the next week, they tried everything. Victoria called me 17 times. Marcus showed up at the base, demanding to speak with me. Helen sent flowers with a note begging me to reconsider for the sake of the family. But I didn't answer Victoria's call. I had Marcus escorted off the base by security, and I threw Helen's flowers away without reading the note. Instead, I spent my time learning about Harper Industries. The company was worth more than $40 million. Much more. The buyer Victoria had found was trying to steal it. With the proper management, Harper Industries could be worth twice what they were offering. I also learned something else. My father had been planning to leave me those shares all along. According to Miss Morrison, he'd updated his will 5 years ago, adding a clause that would transfer the shares to me immediately upon his death. But he'd also left instructions that I should only learn about them after the main will reading. He wanted to see if you'd come, Mr. Morrison explained. He wanted to see if you still cared enough to show up even knowing you'd get nothing. I had cared. Despite everything, I'd cared enough to sit in that room and let them laugh at my tears. On Friday, I got a call from Victoria. This time I answered. Lena, Please, can we meet just the two of us? Why? Because I want to apologize. For everything. For the way we treated you. For the things we said. I want to make it right. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. She was already there when I arrived, looking smaller somehow. Less confident. Thank you for coming, she said. I sat down across from her. What do you want, Victoria? I want to understand. Why didn't Dad tell us about the shares? Why did he hide them from us? Maybe because he knew you'd react exactly the way you did. She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't? You've spent your entire life acting like I didn't exist. You erased me from family photos. You never called, never wrote, never acknowledged that I was your sister. And now that I have something you want, suddenly you care about being fair. I was a child. You were a child when I was 7, and you took my room. You were a child when I was 15, and you forgot to invite me to Dad's birthday party. But you weren't a child last week when you told me I shouldn't even be at the will reading. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For what? For what? For treating me like I didn't matter? Or for getting caught? Victoria wiped her eyes with a tissue. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. But please don't punish Marcus and Helen for my mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting what's mine. But if you don't sell, we'll lose the house. The maintenance costs. The taxes. We can't afford it without the money from Harper Industries. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Then sell the house. We can't. It's been in the family for generations. It was never my family. You lived there for 7 years. I was a guest for 7 years. There's a difference. Victoria leaned forward. What do you want? Money. We can pay you for your shares. Not all at once. But over time. I don't want your money. Then what? I thought about it for a long moment. What did I want? For years I'd wanted acknowledgement. I'd wanted to be seen. I'd wanted to matter. But sitting across from Victoria, watching her beg for something I owned, I realized I'd already gotten what I needed. I want the truth, I said finally. I want you to tell me why you hated me so much. Victoria looked down at her hands. I didn't hate you. Yes, you did. I was jealous, she whispered. Even after you left, Dad would look at your picture and get this sad expression. He never looked at any of us like that. What picture? The one on his desk. You and your mother at the beach. You were maybe 5 years old, and you were laughing. He kept it there for 20 years, Elena. Even after he married my mother. Even after we moved in. That picture stayed on his desk. I remembered that day at the beach. My mother had been chasing me with a seashell. And my father had been taking pictures. It was one of the last good days before she got sick. He never got over losing her. Victoria continued. And you were proof that he'd been happy once. Really happy. We were just replacements. For the first time I saw my half-sister clearly. Not as the enemy who'd stolen my father, but as another daughter who'd never been enough. I'm sorry. I said. You're sorry. Why are you sorry? Because I spent 20 years thinking I was the only one who felt invisible in that house. After my conversation with Victoria, I drove to the cemetery. My father's grave was in the Harper family plot. Next to my mother's, someone had left flowers. White roses, my mother's favorite. I sat on the grass between their headstones and pulled out the letter he'd left me. You were always too much like your mother. I hope you find peace. For the first time, I understood what he meant. Oh, my mother had been fierce, independent, uncompromising. She'd never needed anyone to complete her. And maybe that had scared him. Maybe loving someone so complete had made him feel incomplete. I also understood why he'd sent me away. He'd been drowning, and he'd known I was strong enough to swim. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Morrison. I've made a decision about the shares. Oh? What would you like to do? I want to restructure Harper Industries. I want to make it more profitable, more efficient. And I want to set up a trust fund. A trust fund for Victoria, Marcus, and Helen. Enough to cover the house expenses and provide them with a comfortable living. But not enough to make them wealthy. They need to learn to work for what they want. That's very generous considering. Considering they've spent 20 years pretending I didn't exist? Maybe, but I don't want to be like them. I don't want to use my power to hurt people. What about the business? Do you want to take an active role in running it? I looked at my parents' graves. Not yet. When I retire from the military, maybe. For now, I just want to make sure it's there when I need it. And if they don't accept the trust fund arrangement, then they can sell the house and figure out how to live within their means. The choice is theirs. That evening, I met with Victoria, Marcus, and Helen at the house. I explained my offer, a trust fund that would cover their expenses, but no sale of Harper Industries. You're basically putting us on an allowance, Marcus said. I'm providing for you. There's a difference. What if we don't want your charity? Helen asked. Then don't take it. But the business isn't for sale. Victoria looked at me with something that might have been respect. Why are you doing this? Because 20 years ago, my father made a choice. He chose to take care of me from a distance rather than let me watch him destroy himself. I'm making the same choice. 6 months later, I got a letter from Victoria. She'd gotten a job at an art gallery and was engaged to a man who loved her for who she was, not what she owned. Marcus had started a small construction company. Helen had moved to a smaller house and was volunteering at a local hospital. They'd all accepted the trust fund, but they were also building lives of their own. Real lives, not just lives supported by inherited wealth. I was sitting in my office at the base, reading Victoria's letter, when my phone rang. It was Mr. Morrison. Miss Harper, I have some news. There's been another offer for Harper Industries, much higher than the previous one. $80 million. Not interested. I thought you might say that. But Alina, this offer is different. It's from the military. They want to convert Harper Industries into a defense contractor. They're specifically requesting that you oversee the transition. I set down Victoria's letter. They want me to run it. They want you to build it into something bigger. Something that serves the country. Something that would make both your parents proud. I thought about my mother, who'd taught me to be strong. I thought about my father, who'd given me the tools to be independent. And I thought about the little girl who'd been sent away from a house that was never really home. Tell them I'll consider it, I said, but I have one condition. What's that? I want to establish a foundation for military families who've lost parents, for children who need a second chance, like you did, like I did. A year later, I retired from the military and took over Harper Industries. We became the most successful defense contractor on the East Coast. The foundation helped over 1,000 families in its first year. Victoria came to the grand opening. She brought her fiancé and a photo of our father. I thought you might want this for your office, she said. It was the picture from his desk, me and my mother at the beach, laughing, but there was something else in the frame. A second photo, one I'd never seen before. It showed my father holding me as a baby, looking down at me with an expression of pure love. He kept both pictures, Victoria explained. One on his desk where everyone could see it, and one in his wallet where only he could see it. I hung both pictures in my office, next to my mother's photo. My parents had made their choices and I'd made mine, not out of anger or revenge, but out of love. Sometimes the best way to honor the people who shaped you is to become everything they hoped you could be, even if they couldn't say it while they were alive. The little girl who'd been sent away had grown up to be exactly who she was meant to be, and she'd found her way home at last.